Most people assume you need tens of thousands of dollars saved before you can even think about starting over somewhere new. What if that assumption is completely wrong? What if $10,000, right now, in 2026, is actually enough to open a real door? In most of Australia in 2026, $10,000 is not a plan. It is a head start that runs out before you have finished unpacking. But Australia is not just its capital cities and their property reports and cost of living headlines. Somewhere between all of that noise, there is a different country entirely. One where $10,000 is not a deposit on a lifestyle you cannot afford. It is the actual start of one.
Today we are going through 5 places where $10,000 gets you in the door, keeps your costs low, and gives you enough breathing room to figure out the next chapter.
These are not hypotheticals. These are places where people have done exactly this, right now, in 2026, with real numbers behind them. Let's get into it. Place 5. Tenterfield, New South Wales. Tenterfield sits at the top of New South Wales, just south of the Queensland border, at an altitude of 820 metres on the New England tablelands. Population around 4,000 people. One main street. A hospital. A pub that has been open since 1858. And an altitude that keeps it genuinely cool in summer while most of the country is quietly melting. Key point. Tenterfield's path to ownership starts with raw land, and raw land here is within reach of a $10,000 starting point. Here is why it makes this list. The median house price in Tenterfield is around $424,000, which matters for context, but the median weekly rent sits at around $430. That is on the higher side for a tight budget. The reason Tenterfield works for the $10,000 starting point is not rent. It is land. Raw undeveloped residential blocks in Tenterfield Shire have sold for between $15,000 and $45,000 in the past 18 months. For $10,000, you are not buying land outright, but you are close enough that a small amount of additional saving gets you there. And what you can do with $10,000 while you save is the real story. Tenterfield has a functioning van and caravan community. Long-stay caravan park sites run at around $200 a week, which is manageable on a working income. You live on site, you save the difference, and within a year you are not far from owning a small block outright. The specific thing about Tenterfield that most people do not know, it is the town where Sir Henry Parkes gave the Federation speech in 1889. The speech that started the conversation that eventually became Australia as a nation. The town is genuinely proud of this. There is a museum. There is a tailor shop that has been preserved. There is a civic identity here that small towns often lose, and Tenterfield has kept it. The New England tablelands climate is real. Frosty winters, clear summers, a quality of light that photographers drive hours to find. Bald Rock National Park is 40 kilometres north, a massive granite dome emerging from the bush that most Australians have never seen and genuinely should. $10,000 in Tenterfield buys you 6 months of low-cost living, a chance to understand the place before committing to it, and a clear financial path towards something more permanent.
In Sydney, $10,000 buys you about 11 weeks of not very much.
Place 4. Coober Pedy, South Australia. There is a line from a local real estate listing in Coober Pedy that reads simply, studio-style dugout, suitable for single person, rent includes power and water, $180 per week. $180 per week. All bills included. Underground. Key point. In Coober Pedy, your entire annual housing and energy cost can come in under $10,000, with electricity and water already included. Coober Pedy is 846 kilometres north of Adelaide on the Stuart Highway. It is the opal capital of the world. It is also the most alien-looking town in Australia, a desert landscape dotted with mine shafts, mullock heaps, and underground homes carved directly into the hillside by people who in 1915 decided that the best response to 45-degree summers was to simply go underground and stay there. That decision was correct. Dugouts maintain a natural temperature of 23 to 25 degrees Celsius year-round. No air conditioning. No heating. The rock does the work. In a country where energy bills have become a genuine financial crisis, Coober Pedy's underground homes are essentially immune to the problem. At $180 a week with bills included, your annual housing and energy cost in Coober Pedy is $9,360. That is less than the $10,000 we started with, and it includes electricity and water in a place where both would otherwise be expensive. The median house price for an above-ground home in Coober Pedy is around $91,000, with entry-level properties selling for as little as $50,000. A basic dugout will cost more, from around $150,000, but the above-ground properties represent some of the cheapest freehold housing in South Australia. For someone arriving with $10,000, the path into Coober Pedy is specific. You arrive, you rent the studio dugout at $180 a week. You work. Coober Pedy has an active opal mining economy, a service industry supporting tourism and long-haul trucking, and consistent government and healthcare employment. The town is small enough that if you show up and want to work, people know within a week. You save aggressively in a place where there is not very much to spend money on, because it is 800 kilometers from anywhere with a shopping center. Within 2 to 3 years on a median income, the $50,000 above-ground property is within reach. The population is roughly 1,800 people from over 40 nationalities. There is a Serbian Orthodox Church, a Greek Orthodox Church, a catacomb church built entirely underground, and a pub that has outlasted several attempts by the desert to reclaim it. The Kanku Breakaways Conservation Park surrounding the town is one of the most surreal and beautiful landscapes in Australia. Rust-coloured mesas rising from flat scrubland in a way that made film producers choose it as a location because there was nowhere on Earth that looked more convincingly like the end of the world. It is not for everyone. It is for the specific person who has decided that the conventional Australian city path is not working and who is genuinely open to something different. For that person, Coober Pedy might be the most practical option in the country. Place 3. Mallacoota, Victoria. Mallacoota is one of the most isolated coastal towns in Victoria. It sits at the far eastern tip of the state, tucked inside Croajingolong National Park, a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, on a system of interconnected lakes that eventually open to the sea. Getting there requires a 45-kilometer drive off the Princes Highway down a road that ends at the water. There are no roads through Mallacoota.
The town is deliberately a dead end.
Key point. What Mallacoota offers that no other town on this list can match is genuinely extraordinary natural beauty combined with a community of people who actively chose to be there. Population around 1,000 people in winter, several thousand in summer when the holiday crowd arrives. The permanent community is small, tight, and almost entirely self-selected, meaning the people who live there year-round have actively chosen to be there. That creates a particular quality of community that you simply do not find in towns people ended up in by accident. The rental market in Mallacoota is thin. Properties do not come up often. When they do, weekly rents for a house sit in the $350 to $450 range. Not the cheapest on this list, but the equation in Mallacoota is different because the costs you eliminate are significant. No traffic, no parking fees, no tolls, no gym membership because the national park is your gym. The nearest major supermarket is in Orbost, about 90 kilometers away, which means most residents plan their shopping in advance and make far fewer impulse purchases than city people make daily without thinking. The food culture in the town runs on fishing. Flathead, bream, luderick, the occasional crayfish. A kitchen garden is not aspirational here. It is practical.
With $10,000 arriving in Mallacoota, the most sensible approach is long-term camping or a short-term rental while you establish yourself.
Croajingolong National Park has campsites at minimal cost. The Mallacoota foreshore camping area runs at around $40 to $60 per night in peak season and considerably less off-season. In the quiet months, you could legitimately live in a camper van or tent in or near the town for months at a time while working out whether permanent residency is what you want. The bushfires of January 2020 surrounded Mallacoota and cut it off for weeks. Navy ships evacuated residents and tourists. The town rebuilt. The people who stayed through that period and came out the other side have a relationship with the place that is difficult to replicate anywhere else in Australia.
$10,000 gets you to Mallacoota and gives you long enough to decide if it is where you want to stay permanently.
For a specific kind of person, the answer will be yes. Place TWO, Birdsville, Queensland. Birdsville has a population of around 140 people. It sits at the edge of the Simpson Desert in far southwest Queensland on the Birdsville Track, one of Australia's great outback driving routes, 1,560 kilometres from Brisbane. It has a pub. It has a small hospital, staffed by the Royal Flying Doctor Service when needed. It has a bakery that is genuinely famous in outback circles for its camel pies, which exist because camels are an introduced pest in Western Queensland and someone at some point decided the correct response was to make pies. Key point, Birdsville offers near-free or free residential land to people genuinely committed to joining the community. one of the very few places left in Australia where this is still a real option. It also has one of the most extreme climates in Australia. Summer temperatures exceeding 50 degrees. Dust storms that turn the sky brown. A level of remoteness that means if something goes wrong, it takes time to fix. So why is it on this list? Because the Birdsville Shire Council has at various points offered free or near-free residential land to people willing to build and genuinely commit to the community. The concept of free land in outback Queensland towns is not a myth. It is a documented recurring policy response to population decline, and Birdsville, like several similar towns in Western Queensland, has been explicit about wanting permanent residents. The economics of Birdsville are unlike anywhere else in Australia. There is no landlord class because the population is too small to support one. Housing is largely council-provided or self-built on land that has either been given or sold at minimal cost. Monthly living expenses, groceries, fuel, utilities, are higher per item than the coast because everything is trucked in, but the total spend is lower because there is simply less to spend money on. The Birdsville races happen every September. For one weekend, the population explodes from 140 to over 6,000 people, making it briefly one of the most densely populated areas per square kilometre in outback Australia. The Birdsville Big Red Bash Music Festival happens in July. Both events bring employment and economic activity to the town in concentrated bursts. Living in Birdsville is a specific kind of disappearing. You are not hiding. You are simply in a place where the outside world's problems, housing costs, traffic, overpriced coffee, performative business, do not reach. The sky at night over Birdsville is extraordinary. The desert light in the early morning is the kind of thing that makes people who came for a week still be there a decade later, trying to explain why they stayed.
$10,000 in Birdsville is a starting position.
Given the near-zero land costs and the council's genuine interest in permanent residents, it is a starting position with a realistic path to something resembling ownership. The trade-off is absolute. You are at the edge of the Simpson Desert. That is the deal. Place 1. Cocos, Keeling, Islands, Western Australia. This one requires a different kind of framing entirely. The Cocos Keeling Islands are an Australian external territory in the Indian Ocean, 2,750 kilometres northwest of Perth. There are 2 inhabited islands, Direction Island and Home Island, plus West Island, where the airport and most infrastructure sits. Total population around 600 people. No high-rise buildings. No traffic lights. No shopping mall. Coconut crabs walking across the road at night. Water so clear that from the air it looks like someone simply forgot to put the ocean in. Key point: the Cocos Keeling Islands offer a quality of daily life and a level of genuine remoteness that simply does not exist anywhere on the Australian mainland, and the cost of living there is meaningfully lower than anywhere comparable. There is no GST on the Cocos Keeling Islands. Consumer goods are cheaper than on the mainland. The cost of living for food and daily expenses for permanent residents is meaningfully below mainland Australian equivalents in ways that add up significantly over time. Housing on the islands is complex. Most of it is government-provided or community-leased, and private rental availability is limited. This is not the place you arrive with $10,000 and find a house to rent by Friday. It requires planning, connections, and a reason to be there, typically employment with the Shire of Cocos, the Australian Border Force, or a business serving the local community.
What $10,000 does on the Cocos Keeling Islands is more specific than the other entries on this list.
It gets you there, sets you up for several months of living cheaply, and gives you long enough to establish whether a more permanent arrangement is genuinely possible. The reason it lands at number 1 is the nature of what you are stepping into. The other 4 places on this list are remote by Australian standards. The Cocos Keeling Islands are remote by global standards. 2,750 kilometres from the nearest major city. The internet exists. The Royal Flying Doctor Service covers emergency evacuation. The Australian legal system applies fully. But the daily texture of life there, the lagoon, the silence, the specific quality of time in a place where the population is 600 and the nearest shopping centre is a 3-hour flight away, is unlike anything available anywhere on the Australian mainland. There is a well-known online post from someone who spent 18 months working on the islands. The title reads simply, "I think I accidentally stayed too long." Every single reply is from someone asking how to get there. That is the Cocos Keeling Islands in one sentence. $10,000 does not buy you a life there outright. but it buys you the beginning of a genuine conversation about whether that life is possible. And for the right person, that conversation ends with them still there 5 years later, watching coconut crabs cross the road in the dark, wondering quietly why it took them so long to find the place. Closing. 5 places. 5 completely different ways to start over with $10,000 in 2026. Tenterfield gives you altitude, history, and a clear financial path towards owning land on a real budget. Coober Pedy gives you an underground home, minimal bills, and the strangest and most surprisingly functional community in South Australia. Mallacoota gives you one of the most beautiful stretches of coastline in Victoria and a community of people who deliberately chose to be exactly where they are. Birdsville gives you the edge of the Simpson Desert, near free land, and the specific kind of freedom that only comes from a place the outside world cannot easily reach. And the Cocos Keeling Islands give you 2,750 kilometers of Indian Ocean between you and everything you were trying to move away from. $10,000. 5 doors. Which one you open is entirely up to you.